Don't you have a Sonic review to do? Fuck!
Welcome back to my Sonic Retrospective, where I review every Sonic game I can get my hands on in order of release. These videos are meant to be watched in order, so if you haven't seen the previous videos, follow the link in the description to my handy playlist. Today we'll be taking a look at Sonic Chaos, Sonic's third 8-bit outing. I usually start off these videos with a bit of history of the game and talk about its significance within the franchise, but I couldn't really find anything noteworthy about this game. Sonic Chaos kind of exists in its own purgatory. It was released on both the Master System and the Game Gear in 1993 following Sonic CD. It was developed by Aspect, who were responsible for the 8-bit Sonic 2, which I really like. But that's all that's really noteworthy. Oh, and this is the first Sonic game to have a different name in different regions. It's called Sonic and Tails in Japan. The story this time around is that while Sonic was trying to rescue Tails back in Sonic 2, that one, not that one, Robotnik has returned to South Island to continue his quest for the Chaos Emeralds. Since Sonic and Tails are away on their own adventures, Robotnik manages to get his hands on the red Chaos Emerald, which throws the others off balance. Into chaos, you might say. In this game, you can take control of either Sonic or Tails, which is one of the few interesting things about this game, because the gameplay actually changes a little depending on who you choose. Sonic is pretty much the default and plays like you would expect by now, zipping through colorful levels, collecting the Chaos Emeralds, and kicking Robotnik's butt. But Tails' game is a little easier. Tails actually runs a little slower than Sonic, so he's a little easier to control. Not only is this the first 8-bit Sonic game where you can play as Tails, it is also the first game in the whole franchise where the player can control Tails' flight, which also helps make Tails' portion of the game easier. The biggest difference in Tails' game, though, is that he cannot collect the Chaos Emeralds. Tails can't even enter the special stage, which means you can't really beat the game with Tails. Oh, and Tails starts the game with like 3 continues. That pretty much makes playing as Tails pointless, unless all you're looking for is a slightly different platforming feel. So that makes Sonic the default gameplay choice, as it should be. The game plays as well as all the other 8-bit titles up to this point. Aspect used their previous experience with the Master System hardware while working on Sonic 2 to make Sonic Chaos even faster. Some report that Sonic Chaos is twice as fast as Sonic 2, but I don't really see it. It's still nowhere near the speed of the 16-bit games. Also, they still haven't fixed that weird edge detection yet, which still makes platforming frustrating at times. The level progression is more of the same, 3 acts per level, with the third act being some sort of boss encounter. I have to give them credit, as the boss encounters in this game and Sonic 2 have at least been interesting. The first boss is stupidly easy, but it's interesting that you can't directly attack it by jumping on it since it has a spring on the back. So right off the bat, the game puts you on your toes for the boss battles. But later on, once you get the opportunity, you can just bounce on the top of the boss and defeat them pretty easily. I wish I could say the same about the rest of the levels though. A lot of the level design has been recycled from Sonic 2 and just feels bland. It's kinda hard to explain why, but I just couldn't get into the level design. It doesn't help that this game suffers from the same problem as the rest of the 8-bit games in that secret areas are impossible to find unless it's by accident. The limited graphics capabilities of the Master System and Game Gear made it impossible to tell what parts of the level are destructible, which really becomes a problem in Sleeping Egg Zone. Of course, you can't have a Sonic game without power-ups. A couple of staple power-ups return with the Speed Shoes and Invincibility, though the Speed Shoes aren't really that noticeable. For some reason, Aspect really doesn't like the shield, so that one still hasn't returned from 8-bit Sonic 1. There's also a couple new power-ups added this time around. Rocket Shoes and Spring Shoes. And neither one of them are any fun to use. The Rocket Shoes are pretty much what you would expect, I guess. As soon as you get them, Sonic rockets off in a straight line, and you can turn around and change directions and move up and down, which sounds like it would be useful, but you have so much momentum you can't really control where you go with any precision. And hitting a wall or any sort of vertical surface makes you lose the Rocket Shoes and fall back as if you got hit by an enemy. You're better off just proceeding to the right towards the end of the level, and hope your shoe power doesn't run out over a bottomless pit. The Spring Shoes are even less fun. Once you get them, you can no longer walk. You bounce around the screen almost uncontrollably. That may be hyperbole, but that's what it feels like. Each bounce is actually a bit higher than your normal jump height, so it becomes possible to get to some of the more hard-to-reach areas of the stages. This is actually required in some stages, as the power-up will respawn in the spot you picked it up, in case you lose it, which is really easy. Like the Rocket Shoes, if you hit any sort of wall or vertical surface, you lose the Spring Shoes and get knocked back, usually off that high platform you worked so hard to bounce up to. That brings us to another odd gameplay design choice, the special stages. On one hand, it's nice to have special stages after their complete omission from 8-bit Sonic 2, but they're implemented in a very odd way. The special stages are triggered by collecting 100 rings and, well, that's it. The instant you get 100 rings in any stage, except Act 3, you are immediately taken to the special stage where you try to collect the Chaos Emerald. I'm guessing the stages are all different, but because of the weird physics around the Spring Shoes, I can't even beat the second one. Oh. Well, never mind then. But anyway, whether you collect the Chaos Emerald or not, as soon as the special stage ends, you are immediately plopped into the next stage. This may be why I find it so hard to get into the level design. Half the time I just skip most of the level as soon as I collect 100 rings. Another thing I wanted to point out is that once again, Aspect failed to take the smaller screen into account when porting the game over to the Game Gear. Not only does the smaller viewing area make the game harder in general, but sometimes when you only have a few rings and get hit, a single ring will pop out of Sonic or Tails straight up off the screen and out of the render area, meaning it's not coming back down, and now you're out of rings, which really sucks during boss battles. There's also these annoying slanted portions in some levels which look kinda cool and give off a weird sense of depth, but if you are going any slower than top speed, you just immediately fall off, which really sucks because some of them are above bottomless pits. And of course, Aspect sadistically decided to put a line of rings over each one just above Sonic's running position, meaning you have to jump to collect them. And since you can't slow down on those, it's damn near impossible to get all those rings. One thing I definitely can't complain about is the graphics. The art on the levels really pops off the screen, and the character sprites are very well done and well animated. The game even still looks good when moving fast, and it's still pretty impressive just how fast this is running on an 8-bit system. Way faster and better looking than anything the NES had to offer. But even so, I can't help but feel it's still not quite up to par with the previous two 8-bit titles. Finally, that brings us to the soundtrack, which, like everything else so far, is just kinda meh. This game reuses a couple of tracks and themes from Sonic 2, and the music that wasn't recycled all just kinda sounds the same. There is some variation between the Master System soundtrack and the Game Gear, where some of the level themes are slightly rearranged, but it's hardly noticeable unless you listen to them back to back. There's only a couple of standout music tracks here, like Mecha Green Hill, and Aqua Planet, and Gigalopolis Zone for the Master System version. Which was completely rewritten for the Game Gear. And actually the best music track in the whole game is an unused track. But the rest of the soundtrack is just forgettable. I might catch some flack for this, but that pretty much sums up the whole game for me. Forgettable. Some of the people I've talked with have fond memories of this game, which is understandable. It's not really a bad game. It looks great on both the Master System and the Game Gear, and the music isn't terrible. Though it's no surprise that the people who have told me that they liked this game never played either of the previous 8-bit games. If you like this game, that's perfectly fine. But for me, it just doesn't hold up to the other 8-bit games. And it didn't help that it came out after we already had 2 stellar Genesis games and Sonic CD. The most fun I had with this was making Sonic throw a Hadouken on the sound test screen by actually inputting the move from Street Fighter.